She drove like a madwoman, speeding toward her enemy's house the moment the devastating news reached her. He had kidnapped her flesh and blood, her daughter. 3 years ago she had given birth to the little girl after a fleeting, forgettable night with a stranger whose name she never knew. Yet from that night he left behind the most precious gift of all, her daughter, her little one, her whole world. Since that day she had done everything in her power to keep her child far from the filthy world of the Mafia, away from the ruthless beasts who ruled the shadows. But this time she had made a mistake. Her men had made a mistake. And it had cost her dearly. Now her baby girl was in the hands of one of her most dangerous enemies. "Carl, you filthy bastard! I swear I'll end you when I see you!" Caroline roared, slamming her fist against the steering wheel. Her car tore through the streets as her mind raced with thoughts of her daughter, praying, begging that she would find her safe, unharmed. She arrived at his mansion, the house eerily silent and dark except for a few lights glowing from inside. With a deep breath she stepped out of the car and made her way towards the massive front door, her heart racing in her chest. She was no stranger to danger and violence, but the thought of her daughter being held captive by one of the most dangerous men in the city ignited a primal fear within her. She tried the door, and sure enough, it opened for her. She slipped inside, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floors, her senses on high alert. She crept through the silent mansion, her eyes scanning her surroundings for any sign of life. She could feel her anxiety building with every step, her thoughts racing with worst-case scenarios. Suddenly, she heard a faint noise from upstairs. It was subtle, but it was there, a low moan or a whimper. She froze, her body tense, as she strained to hear it again. She made her way towards the staircase, her footsteps becoming quieter and more cautious. She ascended the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind racing with possibilities. At the top of the stairs she turned down a long hallway. She moved silently, her hand hovering over her gun as she passed by each door, and then she heard it again, the faint noise, now louder and more distinct. It was coming from the end of the hallway. He stood leaned against the wall, dressed in a sharp suit that hugged his muscular frame perfectly. A smirk played on his lips as he watched her, his gaze taking in every inch of her. He slowly pushed himself off the wall, his footsteps quiet as he approached her. "Well, well, well," he drawled, his voice deep and smooth, sending a shiver down her spine. "If it isn't the lovely lady who graced my bed a few years ago. How could I forget?" He stopped in front of her, their bodies only inches apart. She could feel the heat radiating off him, his presence overwhelming. He raised a hand and ran his finger gently down her jawline, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. "As for your little angel," he said, his smirk growing wider, "she's perfectly safe and sound, don't you worry. In fact, she's right upstairs." He pulled her closer, his grip on her arm firm but not painful. His eyes bore into hers, searching for any hint of deception, as he asked the question that had been nagging at him for the last 3 years. "Is the girl mine?" She hesitated for a moment, her body tense as she debated her next move. She had spent the last few years trying to hide the truth, to keep her daughter safe from the dangerous world of the Mafia. But now, standing face to face with the father of her child, she could no longer deny the truth. He smirked, his grip on her arm tightening ever so slightly. "No one had to tell me. I saw her when she was brought here and the resemblance was undeniable. I could see it in those beautiful eyes, the same ones I looked into that night." He leaned in closer, his face only inches away from hers. "You thought you could keep her from me, huh? Thought you could just disappear without consequence?" The pair turned to see a little girl standing in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Her long dark hair was dishevelled, and she wore a small t-shirt that clearly belonged to him. She looked up at them with wide, innocent eyes. "Mummy?" she murmured softly. Carl let go of her arm, his gaze softening as he turned to the little girl. He knelt down in front of her, his hand coming up to gently brush a strand of hair out of her face. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "Did we wake you?" The little girl nodded, her gaze shifting to her mother, who stood rooted in place, shock and disbelief etched on her face. She tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat as her daughter stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Carl's neck in a tight hug. Carl chuckled, wrapping an arm around the little girl's back as he stood up. He looked over at her, a smug expression on his face. "What can I say? Kids love me." He gently patted the little girl on the head before looking back at her mother. His expression turned serious as he asked the question that had been lingering in the air. "So, shall we talk?" He watched as the little girl snuggled into her mother's arms, a strange mix of emotions swelling inner him. He had suspected it for months, but hearing it confirmed sent a wave of conflicting emotions coursing through him. He took a step closer to them, his gaze fixed on the little girl's face. It was like gazing into a mirror at a long-lost part of himself. "How old is she?" he asked quietly, his voice tight with anticipation. The words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. His heart pounded in his chest as he waited for her response, his gaze locked on her face. He had never expected to marry, to tie himself to someone in such a permanent way, but the moment he saw the little girl, something had shifted within him. He couldn't bear the thought of raising her without her mother by his side. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch her arm. "You heard me," he said, his voice taking on a possessive edge. "We're getting married." She froze at his words, her mind racing with a million thoughts. Marry this man? The enemy she had spent years trying to keep her daughter safe from? The thought was absurd, ridiculous even. But as she looked down at her daughter, who had happily wrapped herself around Carl's leg, a nagging feeling of protectiveness washed over her. The little girl seemed so comfortable around him, so unmistakably at ease. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice hoarse with disbelief. "I can't marry you. We're enemies. We come from different worlds." He stepped closer, closing the small distance between them. His presence was intoxicating, overwhelming her senses as his gaze bore into hers. "I am being serious," he said, his voice low and determined. "And yes, we come from different worlds, but that's precisely why we need to do this. To protect our daughter, to keep her safe. This is the only way." She opened her mouth to argue, to protest, but his next words stopped her in her tracks. "And let's be honest," he said, his hand now on her waist, pulling her closer. "You still feel the same attraction you did that night we spent together, don't you?" His words sent a shiver down her spine, a wave of unwanted heat spreading through her body. As much as she didn't want to admit it, he was right. There was still a physical connection between them, an undeniable attraction that had simmered under the surface for years. Taking advantage of her momentary pause, he spoke again, his voice low and seductive. "You can try to deny it, but I can see the way you respond to me, the way your body betrays you. You still want me, just as much as I want you." She fought against the traitorous thoughts that were rushing through her mind, her body betraying her with its desires. Damn him for being so observant, so perceptive. "That is irrelevant," she managed to say, her voice trembling. He chuckled, the sound of it sending another shiver through her. "Oh, I beg to differ," he said, his fingers tracing small circles on her waist. "It's quite relevant." He leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear as he continued. "Imagine how good it could be, you and me, together." Her mind was spinning, her thoughts in a desperate battle to remain rational. She tried to pull away, but his grip on her waist tightened, keeping her firmly in place. "This is crazy," she said, her voice strained. "We can't do this. It's too dangerous." He tilted her chin up, forcing her to look into his eyes. "Life is dangerous," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "But I've never been one to shy away from danger. And neither have you." She swallowed hard, her mind at war with her heart. He was right. She had always been drawn to danger, to the thrill of the unknown. And now, with him so close, his touch igniting a fire within her, she could no longer deny the pull she felt towards him. He sensed her inner turmoil, her struggle to resist the attraction that still burned fiercely between them. "Just think about it," he murmured, his lips hovering just above hers. "Imagine us, as a family, raising our daughter together. No more hiding, no more secrets." Her resistance was crumbling, the mental barriers she had erected over the years slowly crumbling under the weight of his words and his touch. She closed her eyes, torn between her sense of duty and her primal desires. He took advantage of her momentary vulnerability, pulling her even closer, his body pressed against hers. "Just give in," he whispered, his lips ghosting over hers. "Let go. Let yourself." She shivered at his words, her body betraying her as it responded to his touch. Against her better judgment, she found herself leaning into him, her lips parting slightly, as if seeking his kiss. He wasted no time, capturing her lips in a deep, passionate kiss. Her mind went blank as his tongue slipped into her mouth, her body igniting with a fire she thought she had extinguished long ago. The extravagant venue was filled with a mix of guests, the buzz of conversation and the clinking of glasses creating a vibrant atmosphere. At the center of it all stood the newlywed couple, Carl and Layla, locked in a moment of absolute bliss. He wore a sharp black tux that accentuated his muscular frame, his gaze fixated on her with a possessive intensity. She looked stunning in her white wedding gown, the delicate fabric hugging her curves and making her look like an angel. His hand rested possessively on the small of her back as they stood in front of the officiant, exchanging vows and promising to love, honor, and protect each other. He couldn't help but steal glances at her throughout the ceremony, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and desire. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and the room erupted into applause. Carl couldn't wait any more. He pulled her towards him, their bodies pressed close as he kissed her deeply. Their guests cheered and a few wolf whistled, but they barely noticed, lost in their own world. He scooped her up into his arms, earning another round of applause from their guests. The newlyweds were in their own little bubble of joy and love, oblivious to the world around them. The night continued with a lavish reception complete with an extravagant 5-course meal, endless champagne, and a live band. The newlyweds danced to their first dance as husband and wife, their bodies moving in perfect sync to the music. As the night went on, he whispered sweet nothings in her ear, unable to keep his hands or his gaze off her. His possessive